Well, welcome to a beautiful day here in Vermont. My name is Andrew Winter. I'm Executive Director at Twin Pines Housing Trust, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here to the ribbon cutting for 747 Hartford Avenue. This, for those of you who've been following along at home, maybe attending some of the public meetings, this was a very long process, sometimes contentious, but one that we think has ended up with a home for those who are unhoused that we think will be a real asset to the community going forward. But none of this would have been possible without the folks from St. Paul's, and I know we're going to have a couple representatives from St. Paul's, but today I want to start with with Scott Neal from St. Paul's, who is going to welcome us all today. Thank you.
Thanks. So, on behalf of St. Paul's Episcopal Church, I'd like to welcome you here today as we actually celebrate the opening of this building, the 747 Hartford Avenue. It's hard to believe that we've actually reached this point in the process with this opening. It seems like we've been doing this forever. But before I go much further, I just want to do a few thank yous to people. I guess I'm not close enough to the mic. Is that better? I'd like to thank a few people. I'd like to thank Pam Hansen, Bev Barton, and Andrew Pillsbury, who are our senior wardens, our leadership, lay leadership within the congregation, who guided us through the discernment within the building. And I'd also like to thank our partners at Twin Pines and the Haven, Andrew Winters, David Crandall, and the staff there. Also, Michael Redman at the Haven and his staff. And for their flexibility as we sort of kept changing direction, all of us. We sort of were going this direction, and then we said, well, wouldn't it be better if? Wouldn't it be better if? And we just kept changing. So I thank them for that flexibility. St. Paul's has always had a ministry with our unhoused neighbors. For over 40 years ago, a small ecumenical group gathered here at St. Paul's to pray and discern how they might serve the community better and the Upper Valley, both this community of Hartford and the Upper Valley. And the answer to that prayer is today's Upper Valley Haven. Now, it's very different than we were dreaming at that time, but it's where we have finally gotten to. I began my ministry here in 2015, and from the start, members of the unhoused community often came to my office seeking financial help, and also they needed a place to just talk, to find someone who could deal with their spiritual matters. Also, a lot of their secular stuff, they just needed someone to talk to get off their chest. So I was happy to do that, and I still meet with a lot of those people. It's quite fascinating and wonderful to be a part of their lives. So where did the idea of this building come from? One afternoon in 2017, I'll say it again, while we still had our parish offices in the building that's no longer here, I was praying about our mission and our ministry and about our financial glide path, which sort of seemed connected somehow. We needed to do some new ministry, some new mission in the community, and our finances were sort of going down, and we were living off our endowment, and they just seemed like we should do something about it. So as a result of that prayer, actually in that prayer, I had a vision. I had a vision of this campus, this entire campus of the Haven, Twin Pines Building Housing, and St. Paul's, all connected somehow and doing ministry together. Well, that's not where we ended up, and that's okay. But that's one of those turns. And shortly after that vision, Sarah Kobylinski, from the former director of the Haven, stopped by and said, would it be okay if the Haven put Christmas lights on the outside of their building? And I said, sure, why not? I think that would be great. And while you're here, could you talk to me about the housing in the Upper Valley, what's the need? Is there a need? And she said, oh, yes, there is a need. There's a need for all housing. So that's where that started. My senior warden at the time, Pam Hansen, and I then met with Andrew Winters at the Haven, at Twin Pines, and we met with him briefly. It was a very brief meeting on a wintry day. And then we met with Michael Redman, who was by then the new director, and just asking, is there any interest in your participating in this process? And they both said, of course, we'd like to explore this more. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of this ongoing process. As we discussed all this within the parish and with each other, St. Paul's had started a ministry that was a warming shelter and a hot breakfast meal to the overnight shelter guests who were, the rules were you had to be out by 7 in the morning in the winter. They had no place to go. So we were able to come up with a breakfast program and a warming shelter. We did that for a couple of years until COVID hit and cut us short. Within our congregation, our focus began to sharpen, and we started seriously considering a change to our property and how it could be used for housing within the community. Once we reached this point, negotiations and logistics and development plans moved fairly swiftly. They were guided by the expertise of Twin Pines and the Haven. After many meetings and discussions within the congregation, both one-on-one and as an entire congregation, the vestry voted unanimously to sell the property that was behind me, and this property up to our building, to Twin Pines, and a piece of our property that way to go to the Haven. And they voted unanimously, and then the congregation had to vote, and they voted not unanimously, but overwhelmingly to move forward with this process. So here we are with the result of that vision. This building is the result of that vision prayer. As we look forward to our future and new ministry with our neighbors, we will continue to explore, to interact with our new neighbors so that we can learn from each other. It's not that we're going to show these people how to live their life. We're going to share how they live and how we might interact, and we can learn from them and they can learn from us. One project that we're completing today, as you'll see inside, is there's a group of quilts that were created by St. Paul's members, the Bugby Senior Center members, and some of our neighbors. And these quilts will be given to each new resident when they arrive. And we will continue to seek new ways to engage. We're not quite sure what that is yet, but we really want to continue to engage with this population. And I'm going to ask us to pray a very short prayer. So let us pray. Holy One, we thank you for guiding all of us to be of one mind and spirit as we went through these exciting years of study and discernment about how we three partners could come together to create this great new day, this new housing option for the Upper Valley. We ask that you continue to bless all of us as we move forward in collaboration with the residents of this new building. Amen.
Thank you, Scott. So, as you can hear from Scott's telling, projects like this take a lot of time. They take a lot of time and prayer and planning, but they also take a lot of money. And they take a commitment from our federal government and our state government to provide housing and housing opportunities for those who are unhoused. We're really fortunate today to have Congresswoman Becca Balint with us. And we are very fortunate to have a congressional delegation that is fighting for resources at the federal level for affordable housing. I'm thrilled to have her here today. Please welcome Becca Balint.
I'm tiny but mighty. We always have to lower the mic for me.
Like Vermont.
That's right.
How's that? Great.
Great. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah. Wonderful. It's very, very exciting to be here. I love coming to events that are focused around housing. A lot of the work that I did in the state legislature before I was in Congress was around housing. And I just want to acknowledge Senator Allison Clarkson here, who sat with me year after year on the Economic Development and Housing Committee. So much work that we did together. Very happy to see you here. As you just heard, projects like this take many, many years. You have the vision, you got to figure out the stacked funding, and they have to have the tenacity to see it through. And when I come to events like this, I think about the work that I did in the legislature, but I also think about my work prior to being in politics, and that was as a teacher. I taught in 4 different rural public schools here in Vermont, and I saw firsthand the impact that it had on my students when they or their families did not have secure housing. And I often say that housing really sits at the nexus of so many of the challenges that we face here in Vermont and across the nation, whether it's our workforce crisis, whether it is crushing income disparity, or of course the mental health crisis and the crisis of loneliness and the opioid epidemic. So many of the solutions have to start with having stable, secure, affordable, and supported housing for people. So it's a very exciting project. Housing really is the foundation upon which we all try to build our lives and the lives of our family members. It gives stability to our children. It offers our workers stability and a sense of place and community. And for all of us who are deeply concerned about the loneliness and mental health crisis across the country, we know that the solutions are going to start with housing like this, supported housing that really treat people not just as unhoused individuals, but the totality of who they are and what they need in their lives. So it's really imperative to see projects like this, and not just in Burlington or in Montpelier, in places that often receive a lot of attention, but in places like the Upper Valley and White River Junction. And I'm actually from Brattleboro, and so I know what it means to smaller communities as well to have this kind of housing available. So I'm grateful to all the organizations and all the individuals who had a hand in bringing this to reality. And I want to say it's actually a perfect bookend to my day. I started the day in Burlington with a roundtable discussion about the crisis of loneliness, and talked to so many partners around the state, working with the young, working with members of the disabled community, working with elders. And we talked about how important it is not just to build more housing, but to help build stronger communities. And a place like this that is situated with supports around it means the folks living here are going to be held by the entire community and not feel in isolation. So that's very, very exciting. For me as a public servant, you wonder, am I making any impact at all? Sometimes it's very hard to see the impact that we make. But when you're at an event like this today, it's very encouraging that I know that when we come together at the local level, the state level, and our federal partners, and of course, all of the organizations that help to do this work, we can do great things. And this is going to be a great thing, not just for the folks who will be living here, but for this entire community. So thank you so much for inviting me here today. Very, very happy to be part of this celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for being here today, for your strong support for housing across the state. And thank you for recognizing Senator Clarkson here. I think I did see Representative Susan Almy. We do allow folks from New Hampshire to come celebrate with us. So thank you for being here.
Who's that? Wave, who are you?
Susan Almy from the House of Representatives in New Hampshire, and a strong supporter of the work that we do as well. So I think I've got our legislators who are here today. If there's any others, please raise your hand and I will be sure to recognize you. But I think I've got them. I did want to introduce Katie Chaffee. Katie is parishioner here at St. Paul's and has been a critical supporter, along with her husband, John, of this project. Please welcome Katie.
Don't kiss it.
I know. There we go. Apparently I did too good a job last time tightening it. There we go. Okay.
You like that? Can you hear me? I'll hug it here. Good afternoon. This is just a beautiful day for so many reasons. And yet, what a journey. A year ago, a small group of women from St. Paul's met, and we came up with the audacious idea that we could make 18 quilts for our new neighbors. I looked up quilt in the Bible. There's one reference in Proverbs. It says, hatred starts fights, but love pulls a quilt over bickering. We experienced that bickering in the early stages of this building. This building brought huge challenges for our church, for this neighborhood, it will for the new residents. And change is not easy, even the changes we really want. So now we've arrived at a time for new beginnings, a time for celebration, a time for welcome. My sincere thanks to everyone who's been a part of this quilt project. The final quilt came in 2 weeks ago. This was an amazing collaboration. A bunch of us met in the parish hall every couple of weeks and worked on the quilts. We watched the building go up as we sewed. We had people who were real pros, who were highly experienced quilters, and we had people who had never made one in their life before. There were lots of people who donated fabric. There were people who just gave lots of emotional support, that provided tips and tutoring. There were shared pattern ideas. There were people who sewed on tags, people who provided the long arm quilting for the quilts. And I want to give a special shout out to both Barnyard Quilting and Fairleigh, and also some members of area quilt guilds who volunteered their time with that. Our small group grew well beyond St. Paul's, and there are a number of quilts here from the Bugby Senior Center, from our friends, and other community members I don't even know. There's really no way to count the number of people that have been involved in this project. There are a few things I want to say now to our new neighbors. These quilts were a big project. It's taken us a whole year, and we were so happy to make them for you. Joy is sewn into every single quilt. Remember that when life seems hard and too full of changes. And when you feel alone, remember to pull that quilt around you. And know that it wasn't just a few church ladies, it was a whole community. That there are lots of people here who care about you, who wish you well, and are glad that you're making a home here. So we offer you a warm welcome, and we look forward to meeting you. Thanks to all of you for being here to help celebrate this momentous occasion, and I invite you to take a look at the quilts that are in the community room. Thank you.
We need to make sure that all of the future residents get a copy of those remarks along with their quilt. Thank you, Katie. And thanks to all of those who participated in the project in making them. One of our other valuable partners that you've heard a little bit about is the Upper Valley Haven. And the work that we do would not be possible without the tireless commitment of Michael Redman, his staff, and the many volunteers and board members I see here today who make that work possible. This project was one of several that we're finishing this year, one of three, in fact, that we finished this year. And in all those cases, whether it's Riverwalk, where we celebrated in June, Mountain Vale, another project that we opened in July, all of those projects benefit from the work that the Haven does each and every day. It is a critical, important partnership, and one that's going to play out here for the lives of the 18 households, the 18 individuals likely to occupy these units. I say likely because sometimes we do have couples who end up qualifying. We have a project called Parkhurst, 18 units. We do have some couples that live there as well, but all of those folks are going to benefit from the case management services that the Upper Valley Haven makes available. So please join me in welcoming Michael Redmond, the director of the Upper Valley Haven.
What a tremendous day. I mean, really, this is just, how could we do better? And don't want any complaints about too much sun, because really. Today, it's important to me, representing the Haven, to acknowledge the organizations and people that brought us to this moment. And you've heard some of those referenced already, so I'm going to just dig in a little bit. I'm not sure I'll be adding a little bit new as well. But let me start with St. Paul's Church. Father Scott Neal, its leadership, the parishioners. I have to reach back long before this building behind me was imagined. As many of you know, it was the vision and commitment of members of St. Paul's Church more than 40 years ago that Father Scott referenced, that brought the Upper Valley Haven to life. By putting their faith into action to address something that gnawed at their values at that time, that there were people without a home in their community, and they decided to do something about it. Beyond that, they also knew that it was important to bring the larger community together to address this problem. And so 4 other community churches came together with them to create the Haven, from not only White River Junction, but in Woodstock and Lebanon. And on this hill, before we built the modern Hickson House, I'm pointing over there to the left, that it was an old farmhouse that was renovated to serve as our first shelter, first staffed by volunteers from the churches, and later became the professional organization that we know today. And some of the people who were present at that time, more than 40 years ago, are here today in this audience. I mean, think about the commitment over decades to still be here, still thinking about not only themselves and their church, but all the community in which they work and the people that live here. I think it's just tremendous. And it was just a few years ago, as Scott reminded us, as did Andrew, that this same visionary spirit and continued commitment to those less fortunate led to the process in which the St. Paul community again put their faith into action and decided they could continue to lead by example, and came to an agreement with Twin Pines Housing, in which land owned by the church could be the space where new opportunity to those with less fortune, but with no less humanity, could be helped by constructing this beautiful building. I also want to acknowledge, as Andrew did to the Haven, to acknowledge Twin Pines Housing, one of the most important organizations in the Upper Valley. Through its mission, its courage, and if you've followed along the process from here to where we are now, it was a lot of courage that Andrew showed, and talent, believe me, a lot of talent by his whole team, that hundreds of units of new affordable housing have been created. This year alone, in this city alone, 100 units of new housing are being built and opened in White River Junction. And Twin Pines is a tremendous partner to the Haven. This building will include 18 units of housing, which the Haven will be able to provide supportive services that will help the new tenants, all unhoused at the time that they were entering here, to be successful and valuable members of this community, contrary to what some people have said and continue to say. But you wait and watch. You will see, everyone will see that. Other partners to acknowledge are the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Gus, which you will hear from, and the Vermont State Housing Authority, the Maura will speak to as well. They will help make these units affordable and support the services that the Haven provides. We could not do this work without all of these organizations coming together. Finally, I want to acknowledge my team at the Haven, past and present. Welcome to Sarah Kobylensky, my predecessor and friend, who also was part of this early vision and conversation that resulted in this beautiful building. The members of the Haven Board of Directors who are here, led by Kathleen Welling, our president. I also see Sue Buchholz from the Select Board. God help you, Sue. And the Haven team, with special mention to Becky Hadley, the clinical manager of adult programs, and Sonia Bartley, our service coordinator, who have been working for the past few months to complete all the documentation that these people require to allow us to move people into this wonderful building. And I think that's all I need to say today. So thank you all. Thank you to the team, and thank you to the community of White River Junction.
Thanks, Michael. Michael has made reference to some of the funders already. We're going to hear from Maura Collins. Maura is the director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency and one of the really critical partners for all the affordable housing projects that we've talked about, the 3 projects this year. None of them would have been possible without the federal financing that they make available through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. So please join me in welcoming Maura Collins.
Thank you, Andrew, for having me here today. I will spare you the details about what the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program is. All you need to know is that it was a major funder of this project, and that is through the tireless dedication of our entire congressional representation, including Representative Ballant here, who is in D.C. fighting for these tax credits that, boring as they may be, actually funds the work that gets buildings like this off the ground. And I've been the director at VHFA for just about 5 years, but I've been at the agency for over 22. And what I remember about this region and this partnership between Twin Pines and the Haven and even the area churches is what I remember sitting around the Continuum of Care meetings from 15, 20 years ago with my friends at the State Housing Authority and the past staff of the Haven and beyond, which is that this region of the state has always been special. When it comes to serving people without homes, White River Junction has always stood out as among our most collaborative, most truly partnering agencies where people could come together and honestly communicate about the needs of residents, new and longstanding, what the service needs are, and then advocate together to get the money to get the job done. It was a common sense approach. It was based on mutual respect and admiration. And what you've done here in White River Junction, as evidenced by not only this property, but the decades of partnership and experience, has been a model for the rest of the state. My office, sorry to admit, is in Burlington, and so I get to watch lots of places around the state navigate these waters of serving people who are without homes. And as Representative Ballant pointed out, there are a lot of conflating issues that lead to that kind of outcome. A lot of trauma, a lot of poverty that often results in the kind of needs that you see in this community. But what is different about this community is your response. It's the way you step up. I loved Katie's comments about the quilts, and I can't wait to get my eyes on those quilts, because that kind of wrapping in love and support from your community is what's going to make this building successful. So thank you for being the kind of community who's out here today celebrating this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maura, and thank you also to your staff, Megan and Josh and the others on your staff who put in hours to help make this project a reality. One of the other key funders is the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. They are often one of the first funders into a project like this. They help us shape projects like this and figuring out what financing sources are available, how to make sure that the programs work with the folks that we're trying to serve here. And so I'm delighted to have Gus Selig, the director of the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Please join me in welcoming him.
What a great day. Am I close enough to the mic? Yeah. Okay. I often describe the work we do as a conspiracy of goodwill. I was taught by my mentor that nothing government does lasts, whether you pass a law, get an appropriation, change rules, unless you develop that conspiracy of goodwill. And this project really is a prime example of the faith community, nonprofits, local, state, and federal government, investors, all coming together to say we're going to get something really important done. So thank you for that. The last time I was here at the beginning of summer, I compared Twin Pines to the person I thought was the most excellent baseball player I'd ever seen, Willie Mays. And I just want to say again how big a deal it is, 100 new homes in Hartford over just a few months period of time. That took years of work to accomplish, but it's coming to fruition, and we're not done, and it's not just Hartford. There's housing being built just right now down the road in Windsor, and there'll be a project starting over in Woodstock before very long. As you can tell from looking at me, I'm just a bit older than Maura, and I go back a long ways coming to the Upper Valley. And John Chafee, it's great to see you because you were involved with Twin Pines when it had a little different name, and there are actually two organizations that ultimately came together, and what a great organization Andrew has built it into in recent years. When I was here at the beginning of summer, I was in the midst of a really inspirational couple of weeks that I just want to briefly tell you about, because not only did we open those 42 apartments here, but we opened a recovery residence for women and their kids down in Bennington. We broke ground on a new neighborhood in Shelburne that will build 94 homes, some home ownership, a lot rental. We opened new shelters both in Hyde Park and in St. Johnsbury, the first shelters in those counties. So lots of inspirational work. And then I had the opportunity down in Brattleboro to have lunch with the hero of Tracy Kidder's recent book, Rough Sleepers, Dr. Jim O'Connell, who'd been providing health care to homeless folks in Boston for 40 years. And what a great story he has. Representative Ballant, I think you undersold the role that made it possible for me to be here today. We usually put 10 to 15% of the funds into a deal. Today we're here having provided 60%, a little over 60% of the funding, and working with Maura's agency on something called the 4% tax credit that we underutilize. But that happened because at the beginning of the pandemic, the legislature, what happened was the governor was expecting a really tight budget because the economy had been shut down. And the economist walked in at the beginning of the session and he said, Governor, we've got a surprise for you. The revenues are up a little bit. So he proposed adding to our funding, and the House said, that's not enough, and they upped it. And then when it got to Senator Ballant and Senator Clarkson, and you as the president of the Senate, you said, that's not nearly enough. And you raised it yet again. And that made the flow of money into my agency and to the development of a middle-income housing program at the Housing Finance Agency all possible. And we're trying to build on that, continuing that today. But so for Senator Clarkson and Representative Ballant, we owe you a great thanks. And so let's do that right now. We're all hot, and I'm going to wrap up pretty quickly, but a bunch of words come to mind here today. One is partnership, which I think I've spoken to. Another is tenacity. It took real tenacity to get this through permitting. It took a commitment that goes to what I think we call equity and inclusion. It's not the beginning and end of equity and inclusion, but it is a big part of what you did here. It took technical skill to deal with financing, with permitting, and with building. But most important, it's about love and it's about hope. And as I had that week that I was telling you about, it got me thinking about a cousin I lost some years ago. She was the oldest cousin of my generation. And she was kind of a mysterious presence because she kind of left the family orbit when I was about 5 and didn't reemerge until I was about 12 or 13. And she was living out on the streets. Now, her claim to fame, and I think I'm looking at the age of folks around this room, was that she went to Forest Hills High School with a couple guys that you've probably heard of named Simon and Garfunkel. Now, I'm not going to sing, but I'm going to share one verse. One verse. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part, oh, when darkness comes and pain is all around. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down. To all of you in this community, thank you for being the bridge to hope and to love. Thank you for what you've done here.
Well, thank you, Gus. I have to say, the last 2 times you've been here in the Upper Valley, you've really delivered on your speeches. For those of you who were with us last time, so thank you, Gus. It is hot out here. I'm going to just wrap it up really quickly. There's a bunch of people I need to make sure that I thank. I see John Haverstock, our town manager here, Lori as well from the planning office, Joanne, Matt, the folks that were willing to sit through, I think, 40 hours of hearings that we spent on this project. It feels that way over 14 months. So thank you for that. Our architects from Studio Nexus, I see, I do see Jim over there, and Doug, I think, are here, and Mike and Brianna. I thank you for all of your work in making this happen. Paul Simon from Park Design, Adam Morse, and the folks from Engineering Ventures, Ingram Construction, Jeff Ingram. Jeff, this is the second, third project, depending on how you count, that we've done with you. Thank you for, again, delivering a high-quality product on time, on budget. Thank you. We look forward to finishing this up next week. And thank you, Jeff and your team. And then lastly, I really want to make sure that I thank the team at Twin Pines. I see Beth Long. Beth Long was the one who said to me, hey, you should just figure out how to do separate buildings here. This is turning into trouble. I'm going to say thank you, Beth Long. Thank you, Jenny, Jen, the rest of the Twin Pines team for the work that you're doing to lease up units, getting people moved in. It's great to hear the stories every day. I hope that you take a few minutes and share some of those stories. Please congratulate them on and the rest of the Twin Pines team here today for the great work that they've done. And lastly, Daniel from Vermont State Housing. He is here today. Kathleen Burke is not. I didn't see Kathleen in here, but again, projects like this wouldn't happen without the partnership that they play in making these projects happen and financing these projects through rental support. So lots of folks have made this project happen, and thank you very much for being here with us. Get inside, get something to drink. There's cookies and there's quilts. And there's also units available to check out as well. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks for being with me. Thank you.
So everyone, we're going to do a photo.